Hi, it's Mr. G here, and today we're going to be going through 12.4, the benefit and costs of environmental laws. So far we've looked at different things, at different command and control regulations. We looked at different market-oriented kinds of policies, etc., that we can do. But we're looking at the benefits and costs of some of the basically environmental laws. And so some of the benefits, obviously, of doing it are better health for the citizens. It can help industries such as farming, fishing, tourism. Property values can be higher. No one really wants to buy a property if, the place is overly polluted. You don't want to breathe the air. But if it's a beautiful place, lots of trees, etc., property values tend to be higher. Enjoyment factor among citizens. And, all of these are seen as benefits. But of course, as an economist, how do you measure some of these? That's the other thing. Farming, fishing, tourism, well, you can look at, how that's maybe improved, how, farming increases better yields with less pollution, etc. But how do you measure enjoyment? And we can look at satisfaction, etc. But it becomes a lot harder to quantify. If we look at the costs, there are added costs essentially to environmental laws, of course, on businesses. We saw that, basically where it adds this cost, it shifts the supply line. There's more regulations, loss of jobs, etc. So there's benefits and there's costs of environmental laws. And so when we look at things, we look at the marginal benefit versus the marginal cost. And so the marginal benefit for any decision, it's like, well, is there a benefit to doing this versus the cost? And so we have to weigh those two things. Sometimes it's harder to do. Well, like I said, how do you measure into your calculations enjoyment factor? How do you measure into health? Economists have actually gone through and they have figured out, well, how have people's health, less health care that they require as a result of cleaner air. They don't breathe in as much pollution. They have more protection. They don't need to go to the hospital as much. They don't have long-term conditions. Economists even have a calculation for, the value of a human life, essentially what it is in value, and so they're trying to quantify things that really are much harder to quantify, so they can get a bit more of an idea of where things should be at. So if we're looking at things, they look at the marginal benefit versus marginal cost. And so when first you're trying to fight pollution, there's usually less expensive ways to initially cut pollution. Originally with global warming, they seem to be like, the light bulbs, I guess, was an easy one to target. And a lot of them shifted over, getting rid of the normal light bulbs that we used to have to now LED light bulbs, etc. So that was an easy way of them cutting down their greenhouse emissions. But of course, as you go along, it's like, well, in order to cut now even more, we have to do this. Or in order to cut more, we now have to do this. And it becomes more expensive things. We always choose the cheapest thing at first to cut because it's the cheapest, it's the easiest. And then we go for the next cheapest, and then so on and so on. But eventually those costs start rising. The marginal cost, the extra cost to cut even more pollution starts going up. Okay, so that's essentially what will happen. So as long as the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, we're going to continue to reduce pollution. As long as we get more of a benefit as a society by cutting basically the pollution, and it exceeds the cost to cut it, then we'll continue to do it. But as you continue to cut additional pollution, becomes more expensive, marginal cost curve arises. So if we look here, we have a curve and we have marginal benefit, marginal cost. As you can see, it looks a lot like supply and demand, and that's because it is. Marginal benefit is like demand and marginal cost is like supply, but we're not going through that now. But if you look at it, marginal benefit, basically once there is a certain benefit going through all the way through until marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. And that's kind of like an equilibrium in this case, because once the cost is higher than the benefit, as a society, we're not going to do it. We can never get rid of all of the pollution because essentially the cost would be so high that it would outweigh the benefit that we receive from it. Okay, and so as a society, we kind of look where the benefit and the cost essentially are equal. So the marginal benefit, marginal cost. Remember, marginal benefit is the extra benefit we get from reducing some more pollution versus the marginal cost is the additional cost to reduce that pollution. And notice how the cost keeps rising and rising. To get rid of 100% of the pollution in the world would be extremely difficult, extremely expensive, especially the smaller amounts of it. You'd need to come up with new systems, new technology. It would be very expensive. And then the benefit for us would be not necessarily that much. A lot of people would like, obviously, a marginal benefit. They want to keep reducing pollution to almost 0%. But they're also not looking at the marginal cost because for them, there is no cost. They do not see a cost themselves. They only see the benefit. Okay, so an individual saying, I want no pollution. Well, I see the benefit of having no pollution, but I do not personally see a cost of it. And so we have to look at it as a society. What are the costs to it? Loss of jobs, because essentially you see that happening. Supply lines are going to shift with added costs, more costs. We know that's going to affect basically demand, other things. It's going to affect for labor, etc. So those are all considerations that we have to look at them. So that is it for this section. It was a nice and short section. And the next one, we're going to go through a few more issues in regards to environmental issues, looking specifically at international environmental issues. Okay, it's Mr. G, and bye for now.